Today, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Amanda Smith. Hey, Amanda. She is our senior scientist for the built environment here at Project Drawdown. She's a researcher, an analyst, and an educator with deep expertise in buildings and distributed energy systems. She earned her PhD in mechanical engineering and has spent over a decade studying the trade-offs between energy use, economics, and environmental consequences within the context of a building's location and its unique function. Here at Project Drawdown, she is our senior scientist who's focused on making the built environment better for humans and the rest of the living world. She's currently leading the technical assessment of climate solutions under our new open assessment framework, and you will learn much more about that today. Thank you so much for joining us, Amanda. Take it away.
Thank you very much. I'm glad that you want to learn more about what a climate solution really is and why, and get a preview of what we're doing right now to assess that and share the information with you. So I'll use this metaphor of taking a journey down a river. You don't have to have any special knowledge of kayaking or anything, but I think it fits because we are actually experiencing climate change right now. We're making decisions as something's happening underneath us, making decisions under uncertainty, and we need to be able to navigate this safely. So our job is to help you get the information that allows us to do that successfully, right? So for a river trip, we might need a map of where we're going, a weather forecast. We want to talk to someone who's been down that stretch of river before. That helps us to pack the right things, use the right gear to actually get to the destination that we want to be going to and to enjoy the trip. All right, so let's jump in. What is a climate solution? We have so many people talking about climate solutions right now, and that's really exciting because we see that there's this broad awareness that we do actually have the gear we need. We have the right tools to address climate change. But let's be very clear on what real solutions do. Okay, remember, here's what we're solving. Climate change. So the climate is responding to greenhouse gases and other warming agents that are building up in the atmosphere. And climate solution must address this problem. So it must materially reduce the concentrations of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And there's really two big ways to do that. One is that we find the sources of emissions and we cut them. Right. One is that we remove carbon from the atmosphere and store it. So a climate solution must do at least one of these things to be a climate solution. And we, to address the problem as it is, must do like both of these things, right, with a suite of climate solutions working together. And a particular climate solution must be able to do that as it is now. So we need to be able to point to something real that's cutting emissions or removing carbon. And to get more real solutions out there, we will need policy changes, economic changes, behavioral changes. These are not the things that directly affect the atmosphere, right? But they are necessary to propel a solution forward, help us steer it to the right place at the right time. And at Project Drawdown, we're looking for global climate solutions, right? We want to find them, share the best evidence-based information. So we study the problem. On the left, you can see where the emissions are coming from. And we categorize them by looking at where the gas is actually being released into the atmosphere. So is it happening when we're making electricity, in our food systems, or in our interactions with the land, in industry when we manufacture things, in transportation, in our buildings, or other energy-related emissions that happen in the fossil fuel sector more broadly before the fuels even get to our power plants, vehicles, or buildings. And we study where it's going. So most of those emissions currently are staying in the atmosphere, driving greenhouse gas concentrations up. On the right, you can see we do have carbon sinks. That's mostly our lands and oceans. And so a solution can, on the left side, shrink the emissions in one or more of these sectors And on the right side, support our carbon sinks. Ultimately, it's something that will help us quit adding more greenhouse gases to the atmosphere every year. And we've considered really deeply, what does it mean to be a solution? We have some really precise language around that. So here's what it means to be a Project Drawdown climate solution. We need to have an identifiable technology or practice that cuts emissions or removes carbon. And it has to be a physical thing or a clearly defined process that materially affects the concentrations of greenhouse gases. It has to be currently available and proven. That's because we know the urgency of where we are now with climate change progressing, and a real solution must be available for people to deploy. Emissions cuts that we make now will do more to address this crisis, and they will benefit us going forward. So if you're claiming a climate solution, we need to see it, and we need to see some proof that it does what it claims to do. And it must be proven at the right scale to be able to make the impact that you're claiming. For instance, this paddle will not change the course of this ship, right? They're simply on completely different scales. And for a global climate solution, we are looking for something that's meaningful on the scale of the global problem. So if we look at the accumulation of these greenhouse gases, how much we're adding to the problem every year, we want to see impact on that scale. And you can think about it visually as, will it show up on this graph, right? And you can also see from this change over time, we can't wait for something new to show up in future decades while allowing this trend to continue. Okay, now we know what it takes to be a climate solution, but let's also be sure to understand what's out of bounds. Because sometimes you find out the stream you're heading down is not going to take you to a safe place. There are warning signs. Something that isn't yet available or isn't yet proven to cut emissions or store carbon is, at best, a potential solution for us in the future. At worst, a distraction that can take away our focus on solutions that are available. Now, I want to say I love invention. I was an engineering academic for years. I'm in awe of my colleagues who discover new things, who build what's never been built. And I love basic science research. But for addressing the climate crisis, we can and we must move forward with the tech we have now. And we also watch out for potential solutions that are shifting emissions to another place or that are enabling emissions to continue into the future. For example, we could shift emissions into a different sector if we have a technology that causes a lot of emissions when it's manufactured. So we want to make sure that those emissions aren't as big as the emissions that the technology can actually cut when it's deployed. And simply, it's not a solution if it makes life worse. We aren't addressing climate change because we like a certain global mean temperature, right? We're doing it to build a safe and equitable world where people are thriving and a diverse community of other species are thriving. So we as scientists have to look at the evidence, and we have to ask, what does this mean for our well-being and for that of other species? I really like this quote from the buildings experts, Bruce King and Chris Magwood, in their book, where they point out that achieving good carbon numbers can still wreck people and the planet in the process. And relatedly, we watch out for a solution that creates an environmental burden or societal burden that prevents us from building that better world. So if it's contributing to a freshwater crisis, if it's accelerating other types of pollution that just don't happen to be greenhouse gases, if it's driving biodiversity loss, that's a false solution. And within the climate solutions conversation, we want to remember, no one solution will fix everything. We can't point to one solution. We can't just address one sector. There isn't actually even an individual solution that can work on its own. We need a tapestry of solutions that are working together and that are suited to the current moment and the current environment that we're in. We also acknowledge we have no perfect solutions. Any solution, any technology or practice that we have as humans can cause problems and create new risks. And that shouldn't scare us away from change because the course we're on now is too risky to continue. Business as usual means continued climate change, human suffering, damage to ecosystems. But when we're looking at climate solutions, we want to understand the drawbacks of each thing we're evaluating. And what we at Project Drawdown have done for many years now is use science and the best available evidence to show you which solutions are truly solutions. And we use science to inform us about what's available and how it works. The beautiful Drawdown book demonstrated for the first time that the potential impact of climate solutions is actually as big as our annual global emissions. That means we have what we need now to address climate change. And we've continued to update solutions over the years. We've added new research. We've made changes based on what proved out and what didn't. We currently have our solutions library freely available online for you to learn about climate solutions. And with all of this foundational work, we've also been asking ourselves, not just can we make it more accurate and up to date, but how do we find and share the information that we need for this moment? And how do we do a better job making it actionable? How do we inform decisions that are going to move us toward this safe, equitable, thriving world that we want? We need essential information to enable us to act quickly. And we need a way to assess all the solutions together so we can look at the whole spectrum of climate solutions as a whole picture. So as we move forward, we will keep providing science-based information about which solutions there are and how they address emissions in which sectors, but we'll go beyond. We have new data available, we have new techniques available, and we have more scientific expertise in-house than we've been able to have before. And what we've done is created a new framework for assessing potential solutions. We're asking questions around not just which solutions, but where is this solution and where's it growing and where does it work best? When do we implement them? Knowing that we can't do everything at once, which are the solutions that draw down greenhouse gas concentrations the fastest? How does a solution get implemented? What's causing it to grow? What are the barriers? And who's doing that, right? Who has what role in helping that technology, right, get adopted? What kind of decisions are they making and what kind of guidance are they looking for? We're evaluating climate solutions with more detail, more richness than we've been able to do before. And we'll openly share our work so that you can see for each solution the what, the where, the when, the how, and the who. And we think that you are the explorer, right? You all are real people making decisions, and you ought to be able to understand what the science around solutions means for you. So next year, second quarter of 2025, we will deliver this work to you in a forum called the Drawdown Explore. We're working hard to build it right now, and I'm going to invite you for a little tour of the work currently in progress and a sneak peek of some of the things that you will see. And let me start by introducing you to the people who are doing this. We're looking at a big list of climate solutions, between 80 and 100, right? We need skilled researchers and communicators, so we recruited some specialists to do this work. We rely on our team of research fellows to find and present the most important information about those questions, the what, where, when, how, and who. And everyone on this screen has a graduate degree and deep expertise in a topic related to climate solutions. And they've chosen to spend many months with us using their science and engineering training to make sense of the research for you. All right, so we dig into the scientific research and data for every potential solution we evaluate. And I'll show you some of that just so you can get a glimpse of the process, okay? The table on the left comes from a real research paper that we studied on heat pumps, right? Heat pumps are a climate solution. And this table is actually comparing lots of scientific work and very specific details of computer models that other researchers have used. If you can't take this in at a glance and learn something about heat pumps, don't worry. It also takes me time to process it, and it's in my field. But we on the solutions assessment team are the kind of people who see information like this. We get excited, we get interested, we roll up our sleeves, and we dive into it. Our team has a systematic process for evaluating each climate solution, and I'm going to show you the big elements of what we are looking for. Right. So as an example, we'll ask these key questions around this climate solution of heat pumps. And I assume that technology is familiar for you already. But I do talk about heat pumps a bit more, the technology in my previous Ignite talk. Okay, so the first thing we look for is effectiveness. Remember, the first criteria for anything to be considered a climate solution, right? Has to cut emissions or store carbon. So we're looking for what does the evidence show about how well it can cut emissions or remove carbon. And when I think about real heat pumps operating in the world, right, we're trying to make this connection between what the science tells us about their potential to cut emissions and actual heat pumps that are installed. This particular table comes from one paper that's looking at emission savings from heat pumps compared with other energy saving changes that you can make in homes in the United Kingdom. So we're looking through individual papers with lots of specifics, and we're putting that in context of the strength of the evidence overall. We also want to know, how much does it cost to deploy that solution? The world we live in means someone's going to spend money toward making that happen. And we want to understand what's feasible now economically. And we also want to look for which costs happen upfront, which costs are ongoing costs, and which solutions have the potential to make revenue or bring in money, because these things factor into real world decisions. And we want to see, what are we learning about how costs will change as the technology scales up? So as an example, this is some recent data that we pulled. You can view from the International Energy Agency, which is looking at how the cost to provide heating with two different types of heat pumps compares with a fossil fuel alternative of a gas boiler. We want to understand the current landscape, so we look for the most recent reliable data about how much of it is out there. What is our current adoption level? We consider what this means for this solution to grow, right? In this case, how many new heat pumps are going in right now? And you can see some annual growth data for air source heat pumps on the right. We're also asking, what's the potential for this solution? Is there a hard cap, right, on how much we can get out there based on physics? And then knowing where we're at now and what the maximum theoretical level of adoption is, we can ask, what's a realistic range of adoption levels that we can get to in the next couple of decades? We use studies from leading scientists, leading organizations to understand that based on their projections for what a near-term achievable range is. We also look for how this can benefit people and the rest of nature. So you might have heard climate folks talk about co-benefits. That means a solution has benefits in addition to their ability to cut emissions or store carbon. But of course, these are often the most important reason to implement something. There are real benefits for real people and non-human species right now. So my colleague, Dr. Yusuf Jamil, is leading this work on benefits, finding out, what does the science have to tell us about whether a solution can help us adapt to climate change, increase our well-being, or protect the environment and biodiversity, and how that works. So we can think of this question for heat pumps at the scale of a city. Heat pumps are providing heat with electricity rather than having each building burn fossil fuels. And on the right, we found this graph in a research paper where they were looking at how do heat pumps used instead of fossil fuel heating help local air quality. So I've actually been amazed to find that with every solution we've looked at so far, there is evidence showing that it provides other benefits. And finally, knowing that we don't have a perfect solution, we do seek out information on the risks to deploying a solution and what's been shown to mitigate those risks, because we want to understand what kind of trade-offs we're making when we scale up a solution. So for heat pumps, because they're providing heat with electricity, they can drive emissions from power plants that use fossil fuels. So if heat pumps increase electricity demand, that can get complex when we're shifting emissions between sectors. And this chart actually comes from a study that was presented by researchers at the National Renewable Energy Lab, who are considering the building sector and electricity sectors together in the US to understand how emissions are changing when we electrify with a heat pump boiler technology. Quick spoiler, heat pumps did reduce emissions, even if electricity emissions increased. So when we've looked for everything that we need to study related to our solution, that goes to our in-house science team. So these scientists are all serving as guides and as internal reviewers for the work that we do on solutions. We package it into an assessment, and 2 members of the science team for each solution will serve as advisors and will review the material. And we have great scientists here, but we can't know absolutely everything and we can make mistakes. So we also ask 2 external reviewers with deep expertise to check our work, and we use that valuable criticism to improve. We want every explorer to be able to find guidance that's relevant to their journey. So all of this work, from considering something as a solution to presenting it to you, will be guided by these principles. We use the best quality research that we can find, and we evaluate the strength of the evidence. We use the most recent research and data, but we also focus on what's happening now and what's relevant now. We want it to be simple to navigate and to understand. So there's no requirement for advanced training to learn about climate solutions. And we're being transparent in a way that we've never done before. We're sharing the details of our process, opening it up to you through events like this, but also by providing our work with the explorer, our methods, our calculations, our actual material. And it's a more holistic assessment, right? We're looking at real world impacts and benefits beyond quantifying changes in greenhouse gases. It's very place-based, right? Because all solutions are implemented locally somewhere, we want to know how the solution's impact will differ around the world. We want it to be actionable. We want to highlight who has influence over the solution now and how different groups can influence their adoption. So everything from policymakers to business leaders, nonprofits, investors, philanthropists, educators, and communities, households, individuals like us. And of course, we want it to be explorable, meaning you can discover not just information about solutions, but browse the connections between them and build meaning for yourself from our findings. So we work with these principles in mind. So when you're ready to dip your paddle in and get moving, you can be confident in where you're heading and have a sense of what you'll encounter. And if you're on the water, you may not have time to study the way we do. So we're looking for real knowledge that comes from pulling these studies together. Let's give an example for heat pumps, right? You might see something like, here's what it does. It's an efficient source of heat that comes from electricity. Here's how it works. It cuts emissions from fossil fuels we would have used for heating, right? And we get a climate benefit when that comes from clean electricity. There's a caveat. Heat pumps increase the demand for electricity. And here's what I can tell you about that problem. This would actually be the upshot from that big long table that we looked at next to Rosie the Riveter. It's that challenge, right, can be mitigated if we have heat pumps who have flexibility in their operations. You can think of that as being able to adjust based on what's actually happening on the grid. And there's also some promise for having heat storage, having the ability to provide heat now, use it at a different time. And here's what all the transition studies that are looking at how can we as a world switch to climate-friendly heating, here's what they all say. Heat pumps always play a role, and most experts say they must have a central role. Okay, so that's probably a little more digestible than lots of figures and tables and research papers, but how would you use this? Well, if you're in our broad public audience, that's everyone on the Zoom meeting, including me, maybe your household is wondering if getting a heat pump will actually help because you know that a lot of your electricity comes from fossil fuels. Well, now you know that heat pumps are important in the energy transition, even as we are still transitioning to clean electrical power, that they have this central role. Maybe you're a climate professional. You're someone in business, philanthropy, or investing who is making decisions that will move climate solutions. For example, maybe you're in facilities management at a company that has a lot of facilities in a particular area. And you know your electricity grid is worried about some high new demand coming from heat pumps and new demand peaks in the winter. Well, now you know that you have options to play nice with the electricity sector, right? Your top option is heat pumps with flexibility in their operations. You might also look into thermal storage options to add even more flexibility. And a specialty audience is our fellow researchers. We affectionately call these our super nerd friends. You can use this kind of information to get up to speed fast and to choose interesting practical research problems around climate solutions. And you can access our spreadsheet with the literature we reviewed, the data we processed. So you're not starting from scratch. We want to accelerate your work. And we want to bring it not just to you personally, but to you where you are. Because giving meaningful information about how effective something is, how much it costs, how it can be adopted, its benefits and drawbacks, means looking at how that varies geographically. You may have already been thinking, hey, a heat pump doesn't have the same performance or the same cost in different places. Well, we find that there's much more geographic data available, and we have a new in-house specialty in looking at this, so we can look at the geography aspect and actually aim to answer new questions. And I'll just give you a couple of examples, which is work in progress, questions we are thinking about right now. If we want to know where is the solution most effective, let's look at nutrient management. Okay, we know that good management of the nutrients used in agriculture, it's fertilizer, can reduce emissions without reducing our ability to feed people. But that's useful where the fertilizer is being over-applied, where it's not all getting to the crop, and it's causing emissions. So we want to know, where are the emissions coming from? We start by looking at that. These are data on the emissions coming from that use of fertilizer, and the redder areas have lots of fertilizer emissions per unit of land. Okay, then we look at, where will this solution be effective at reducing emissions based on where that's happening? So the green areas show places where we can avoid a lot of emissions with this nutrient management solution. And you will notice this opportunity is concentrated in a few clumps. It's not everywhere around the globe. And we need to know this to get the solution to the right place. We can also ask questions around how the benefits and risks are distributed. So who's being affected by climate problems and who could benefit from them? All right, another solution is improving cement production. We know that cement production has this huge climate impact because we make so much of it. There's a couple of big ways to do that. One is to burn less fossil fuels in the process of manufacturing it. So we start by looking at where the emissions are coming from. And we found this data from our friends at Climate Trace on where are the actual cement plants, right? We wondered, can we use this to learn more about who's being impacted by this pollution? So my colleagues, Dr. James Gerber, Dr. Sarah Gleason, started getting together and thinking, what can we learn from this? We have data on the climate pollution, on the carbon dioxide tied to those plants. But we also know that when we're using fossil fuels, when we're burning them alongside that climate pollution, comes other pollution that can hurt our health, like black carbon. And by processing the data about how much pollution they're emitting, we can start to identify a neighborhood of emissions. These are places where there are a lot of emissions from cement plants happening in a given area. So the redder areas show where emissions from these plants are more dense. When air pollution is accompanying that carbon dioxide, that means we're putting real people at risk now. So knowing where the problem is concentrated can help us find the best places to intervene. And we want to look for opportunities to help improve the health of real people right now while we address climate. So we're in this process of assessing climate solutions, evaluating what can science and the best evidence tell us about which solutions to use and where, when, and how they should be rolled out and who plays a role. We're right now evaluating a list of 84 potential climate solutions. We started with a list of the 93 currently on our website, and we've considered each one in light of everything you've seen here today. And we'll do that for lots of other potential climate solutions. We'll continue revisiting them. We just start with the definition. Is it a global climate solution? Does it have some disqualifiers? And then we queue up our study. How effective is it? What does it cost? Where is it adopted? What are the benefits and risks? And we turn that into evidence-based, explorable information for you that can guide us on these 5 questions. So we're committed to getting that knowledge to you as quickly as possible. At this point, I'm going to pull my boat over. I'm going to take a break, catch up with my team on the sandbar, dig into more solutions research. We have a lot of work to do because we are launching the Drawdown Explorer starting next spring, and we can't wait to share it with you. We'll keep sharing everything we're learning and our insights along the way. So if you're not already connected with us, getting our emails, Elizabeth will let you know how to get LinkedIn. And thank you for spending your time here today. I'd love to hear more from you, and I'm happy to tell you more details about what we're doing in the Q&A. Thanks.
Hi, Amanda. Sorry, everyone. I was working behind the scenes, furiously capturing all the questions going on there. And I have to say thank you again to everyone who's attended today's webinar. I'm Todd Rubel, Director of Marketing and Communications at Project Drawdown. And I think this might have set a record for the most questions we've ever had during one of these webinars. So maybe, Amanda, quick question for you. Could we take a look at these questions afterwards? Because we're definitely not going to get through all of them. Sorry, folks. But maybe prioritize and respond to a few of those in the email that we send out to all the registrants from today. Because I think there really are some great questions that have come through on the back end, and we want to get to as many as possible. So, okay, for starters, then to some of our questions we've got today. I love this question that came in. You mentioned that the current list of solutions that will go into this Drawdown Explorer next year is 84 solutions. Were there any solutions on the edges that your team had to make a hard call about keeping in that 84 or not including in the 84?
Yeah, and let me give you audience folks an insight just into the webinar process, right? Someone pointed out, hey, you really need to mention how many solutions you're looking at. And I really don't want you to anchor on that number because it will absolutely change. And what we're doing is everything has to meet the criteria for being a Project Drawdown climate solution, right? But there are also decisions around what things to group up, right? Is wind power a technology, or does it make more sense to have onshore and offshore wind separately? Lots of decisions like that. So the numbers could go up a bit, could go down a bit. You will see between 80 and 100 climate solutions. We won't capture every possible solution. Some are very local, right, and don't have a global impact, and that just means we can't get to them all. But you will see probably between 80 and 100 of them. And we are thinking about that all the time. I actually have a meeting later today to look at our findings for something new that I proposed as a climate solution, where we really need to sit down and look at what our research fellow is telling us about what the evidence is showing and decide whether that fits as a climate solution or not. Things that don't fit as a climate solution, that's okay. We still have a lot of information and wisdom that we can gain from that, and we'll keep sharing that with you. It just won't be an official Project Drawdown climate solution on the list.
I just want to mention this too. There's been a lot of chatter in the chat about this also in the Q&A, that we do have the current list of solutions that we've developed over the past couple of years, 93 of them on our website right now. Check that out. If you're looking at the book, if you're looking at the solutions in the original Drawdown book, there have been several iterations online since then. So don't rely on the book anymore. The book is pretty out of date at this point, and this will be a major quantum leap forward next year in terms of our assessment of solutions. So just want to let people know there are resources around climate solutions on our site right now today. A lot of questions came in related to carbon capture and storage. Can you talk about how the team looks at that as a climate solution or not as a climate solution? Yeah, how do you address that topic?
Yeah, so there are different forms of carbon capture and storage, right? And what we know from the evidence is that the best carbon capture and storage, and most of it, right, comes from our natural systems. So some of our solutions are around supporting those natural systems. That's priority. There are also ways that humans have devised to try to capture carbon and store it. And we look at it through that lens. So one of the things that we find based on, again, the urgency of the action and the fact that a solution has to be demonstrated to work at the appropriate scale. That means when we look at solutions, potential solutions around direct air capture, they don't muster up. And I'm sure Elizabeth can find and share with you, either here or in the notes or both, a piece that my colleague John Foley wrote, explaining why that's actually a distraction and isn't right now delivering what we need it to deliver. We have so many better options on cutting our emissions. But in terms of how do we treat them? Well, we treat them just like everything else in the process, right? So if we look at producing electricity from biomass and capturing the carbon, we treat it as any other climate solution. We make sure that we have a defined technology, and then we look for those big five high-level things, and we present the results based on what we're learning from the science.
There's a question in chat that wasn't on my list to ask next, but I just want to jump over and respond to this one. There's a question about what are we doing to make sure these solutions are implemented. A large part of our work at Project Drawdown focuses on the science of climate solutions and really being a go-to resource around understanding the science of different solutions. But another major effort at Project Drawdown is focused on how do we work with key groups, investors, philanthropists, business leaders, others, to really scale those climate solutions. So at our organization, we do look across that spectrum of understanding the science of the solutions and then figuring out those levers to really scale solutions across the world. Related question for you, Amanda. Someone was asking, are these solutions just US focused or are they international? What's the scope of the solutions that we're looking at?
Yeah, we are looking for global climate solutions. And we are an organization based in the US, right? We hire people based in the US. And we recognize that we're going to have a US based bias. And we do what we can to make sure that we're being real about what's possible in other places. That's part of why this geography focus is so important to us, because as you can see, there's really critical places to intervene. And we expect that to be true for each solution. There are places where improving cement manufacturing is most valuable. There are places that need improved nutrient management. And there are other places on Earth that actually need more fertilizer. And so we can't go absolutely down to the ground level everywhere. But what we want to do is start bridging that distance between, hey, here's a climate solution that can work at the global level, and you, where you are in a specific place. So that's what the Explorer work is really bringing into the fold. But we've always looked for global climate solutions because climate change is a global problem. These concentrations building up in the atmosphere are affecting all of us, even though we don't all bear the cost of that the same.
There's another question here about, I'll just ask how it's written. It's a really good question. At what stage of development do you determine if a climate solution is valid? Then they go on to say there are various stages in venture capital. So how are we determining, how are you thinking about that question?
Yeah. We do not have a specific cutoff. So I know that, capital investors will kind of grade things in a certain way. If you want to develop a technology and get it funded by the US government, they have a scale of technology readiness. But you can think about it as there should be something out there doing this thing that cuts emissions or that stores carbon that we can point to that's demonstrated. On the back end, that also means that the scientific principles behind it make sense, right? And that we can look at the evidence that it works. And we leave a little bit of room in here because there are climate solutions at different levels of development and different levels of adoption. So what we want to do is communicate the information to you about, where that's at. And that's part of our criteria, right? So the cutoff is really, is this actually something that someone could acquire and deploy where it's needed? And when that's not true, but it looks promising, then we want to get that information to you and say, hey, this is a potential solution. This is a place to look. This is a place where the science indicates that it's promising, but we won't yet kind of give that a stamp of it's a Project Drawdown climate solution right now.
I'm sure you've had this discussion within the science team. There's a question in the chat here from Daniel about, as activists, we spend a lot of time fighting false solutions. Is the team thinking about, we're going to have this list of climate solutions based on the criteria that you outlined, but will we also call out what maybe isn't ready to be called truly ready to be called a climate solution, or something that's falsely advertised as a climate solution? Will the team go that far, or is that a bit outside the scope of a project like this?
Yeah, we'll go that far. So I'll call out Director of Capture. It's not where we need to focus right now. You can reference the article I mentioned. We have an excellent piece by someone who's actually working on the Explorer project and leading the work in the agricultural and land use, land cover change sectors. So he wrote a piece on ruminant management for cows. So we are looking at what people are talking about and we're comparing it against the science. And we do think that it's really important to get that solution information to you, right? And so nuclear fusion is not a climate solution because it's not something we can point to a nuclear fusion plant and show that it's reducing emissions right now. So yeah, we are absolutely looking at that, and we will try to make that really clear where something doesn't meet the criteria of a climate solution.
I love this next question, and a little bit of a side statement here is that as someone who's currently doing a remodel project, I'm really excited that we had an electrical contractor drop a question in the chat. So thank you for being here today. And I know this topic is near and dear to your heart, Amanda. So this person's question is, what can contractors do to leverage our positions in the construction industry to make a positive impact on reducing emissions and increasing the number of resilient and healthy structures? So that's a bit down in the weeds, but I want to use that as a lead into, definitely feel free to answer that question, but talk a little bit about how the Explorer can be used by different audiences that might be accessing this information.
Yeah, and let me talk about that in two different ways, because I think we can just talk about what can you do as a contractor. And yeah, this is near and dear to my heart. I think there's so much that people in the building trades can do. You can teach us as scientists about what the real barriers are, but you are so helpful for your clients. And I've learned this through talking to people like Todd and other colleagues who are trying to make the best decisions in their own homes. And that's really, really hard for people. And what they find helpful is when that contractor is able to educate them just to explain what they're doing and why, right? How does the thing work? And what are the criteria around this decision? Really helps those customers to understand what equipment is going to be best for them and deliver a climate benefit as well. The thing we need to do, right, within kind of all the building scientists, building engineers, building trades together, is make sure that the climate solution is the default option, right? So that people like Todd don't actually need to learn as much about HVAC, even though Todd may be interested in it, right? He's a busy guy. And we need to be delivering, heat pumps as a first option. We need to be having, climate-friendly insulation and building products available locally within the distribution system. And so there are real barriers to that. And you're seeing them, but you're also part of the system that can change so that it's much easier for someone to automatically do what's going to be better for the climate. The way that will fit in the Explorer is we actually have a team, and I have definitely focused on science here. We have a team with our policy advisor, with our team members who work directly with businesses, with our team members who work directly with people for deploying capital. And they're all also looking at every climate solution as we are evaluating the science. And what they're looking for is, what are the particular roles that people can play for this climate solution? So for heat pumps, you would see, hey, if I'm a practitioner, if I'm someone developing this technology, here are one or two things that are the most promising things you can do in that role for that specific climate solution. So you will see that as part of the Explorer too.
Will the new set of solutions, this is summarizing a few questions that have come in too, will the new set of solutions, like we do with the current solutions, not only look at technology solutions, but also behavior changes such as, reducing, switching to plant-based diets, or, some of our other solutions are not in that same technology space, but they kind of span a spectrum. Will the new solutions also span that similar spectrum?
Yeah, the new solutions will be really similar topics to what you've seen before. Behavior change is an interesting one, right? Because switching to a plant-based diet is a very specific behavior change. We can measure it, we can point to it, we can actually study it scientifically, and we can see the benefits. There are other behavior changes that need to happen for us to roll out climate solutions, right? So you may be really passionate about creating behavior change, and I don't want you to be insulted that we're not calling that officially a climate solution, right? So if this electrical contractor helps someone understand what the right heat pump for them is or what the benefits are, they are doing climate solutions work, right? But the climate solution is really focused around the very identifiable technology, the thing that's doing the emissions reduction or the carbon storage. So we recognize there are needs for behavioral change, there are needs for policy change, and we need economic change for these solutions to work together, right, to get the job done, to allow us to quit adding emissions to the atmosphere. So we're presenting that in context of, hey, what behavior change is relevant to driving these technologies and practices forward? So yeah, you will see climate solutions like switching to a plant-rich diet, but you will also see information around the evidence that behavior change can affect the rollout of each climate solution we're looking at.
Speaking of the need for climate solutions, apologies, the gas-powered leaf blowers have fired up in my neighborhood, so sorry for the background noise here, everyone. There are a lot of questions too about co-benefits, which feels like it's somewhat new too in terms of the climate solutions presented on our website. Can you talk about how the science team and the fellows you're working with are thinking about co-benefits related to solutions?
Yeah, we're trying to recognize first that there's no hierarchy, right? It's not we address climate and if it helps people and other animals, great. We understand that it's coming together. And so we've always been interested in co-benefits, right? But here we're really threading that throughout the work. So what that looks like when we're working with it is if we're considering a climate solution, say we're studying heat pumps, then as the fellow is gathering, synthesizing, comparing research, they are looking for what it mentions about first those other aspects of what drives the change, what are the levers or accelerators for that climate solution, and also what are its real benefits? What are the complementary benefits besides cutting emissions or storing carbon? And we capture that information. My colleague Yusuf Jamil, who has built a framework for understanding the human well-being aspects of bundles of climate solutions, right, is leading this effort. So they work with him, right? And he studies for every solution we're doing. What are its benefits to people? Can it help us adapt to a changing climate? Can it make people's lives better? And can it help the environment and biodiversity? And I've been amazed, honestly, at how much is coming back. So we will highlight the key benefits that come with each solution that aren't just cutting emissions or removing carbon. And that'll be a major section in the Explorer. So you'll see that along with each solution.
In the past, the solutions on the Project Drawdown website have been ranked. So that, this is the number one solution, number two solution. We've started to move away from rankings as an organization, but people love the rankings. So how are you and the team thinking about that going forward?
Yeah. So I have mixed feelings about the rankings, right? It's tough to see that someone might look at a list and say, this is the top thing that we can do to address climate change, and not look at the rest of the list or the context, right? There are differences, of course, in the global potential for different solutions to cut emissions or store carbon. Absolutely. So we want to deliver that information. But we want to be clear, right? There's no one solution. We actually need to do all of those things. So I like the way that my colleague John Foley talks about it. Is like, if we're making soup, you're going to need a lot of some stuff and a little bit of other stuff, right? But to get soup, we can't just have a big bowl of broth. Okay. So I don't encourage people to rank and say this is the number one solution for climate change because we need solutions for climate change. But I do think it's neat because a lot of times people learn about, hey, something that I'm involved in actually has a much bigger global potential than I realize. I actually have a friend who found that refrigerant management was a huge solution, learned about it from Project Drawdown and works in construction, right? And is actually looking for how are we managing refrigerant and cares about that. So that's really exciting for me. So I want you to be able to find that kind of information. The idea is not that we're giving you a ranked list. The idea is that you can explore and sort the information that we're finding in a way that's meaningful to you. So that might be, I'm just curious, which solutions have the biggest climate impact? I might be curious which solutions can pay for themselves in the electricity sector. You can sort and find that. You might want to find, hey, what are the solutions that have strong benefits related to air quality? Maybe that's the issue that you really care about. You will be able to sort and find that information and compare the solutions with each other. Just know that comparing solutions doesn't mean that one solution is more important than the other, or that we can go down the list in order. We actually have to find things that fit well together.
Before I ask the last question here of the day, I just want to mention once again to everyone, well, I just want to say first, thank you for all the questions. They've been incredible. And our team has captured all these questions on the back end. And like I said, we'll work with Amanda to try and answer a number of these questions. In the email we'll send out to you in about a week, we send this to everyone who's registered for today's webinar, along with a recording of today's talk. And the links we've been sharing will be in that message too, along with some high-level kind of talking points to remember from today's webinar. So last question of the day is, we're wondering what has surprised you and the team the most so far in terms of conducting this research, this look into these new solutions? And then maybe related to that question, what's been the biggest challenge for the team so far in terms of reviewing climate solutions?
Yeah, I think when we look at the overall process, I mentioned I'm surprised like how many benefits there are that I didn't know to implementing certain climate solutions. I've been a little bit surprised actually when we're assessing solutions that I'm pretty familiar with, like heat pumps, that it is actually quite difficult and complex to pull the research together, even if you really understand the physics of it, because we're measuring things a little bit differently, right? It's kind of hard to compare one place to another. So that's a surprise in a good way. We like that kind of challenge. I've been surprised both at how much data is out there. So I showed you some of the geographic data that's quite specific that we're able to use to ask really interesting new questions. Also, and how much data is not out there that we need when we're going through that list, when we're looking at how effective is it, what does it cost, where is it adopted. We also don't either have the most recent data available, we don't have it publicly available, right? And so I have been very surprised in both directions. The biggest challenge, I think the biggest challenge, I mean, it's hard to say. There's like a lot of little challenges, but if we roll them together, we're trying to find the most accurate and also the most kind of rich pieces of wisdom and make sure that they get to you clearly. So there's always a struggle as a scientist, right, between communicating all the details that you know matter in specific situations and giving that message in a way that makes sense and that fits for the needs of the people. So I'll also say I'm really grateful for your team, Todd. We have, my colleague, Mary, who's looking at how we're delivering that information, but we also have the communications team working with people in those core audiences that we work with. So, businesses, investors, philanthropists, to understand what they need. And we have an advisory board that's helping us get that so that it is actually what we want, so that it is actually informative and actionable. And so it's been a challenge in a good way because it's really stretched us as scientists who many of us have been really nerdy, deep in the research and academia for years, to think about connecting it directly to you where you are.
I want to say thank you once again to Amanda for a fabulous presentation today. Like I said, thank you to everyone who attended for all of your questions too. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can in the recap. I also want to give a quick shout out for our next Drawdown Ignite webinar in mid-November. Dan Jasper, Senior Policy Advisor at Project Drawdown, will be joining us live from COP29 in Azerbaijan. And he'll be giving us a look at where climate policy will go in the US following the election. Hopefully we have the results by the time of the webinar, and then also taking an international perspective on where does climate policy go internationally, and some insights he's gathering from the COP29 gathering. So join us for that. We'll have an announcement of that coming out in the next week or so. Thanks again to Amanda. Thank you all for joining today, and I hope you all have a great day. Thank you. Bye now, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.